when you are in a hypnotic state, I have you imagine and visualize things, experience things however you want them to be. Because you see, this part of the mind cannot tell the difference between imagination versus reality. So we want you imagining things exactly the way you want them to be, with the idea that that is the way you are going to communicate to your subconscious mind the behavior, the patterns that you want. And then there's also this idea that there is the superconscious, that there's something even larger. And that when you're in this state, you're connecting to that. And you're telling the universe, this is what I want.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hi, welcome to the podcast, The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman. My guest today is Sasha Carrion. We're going to be talking about her work in hypnosis, hypnotherapy, life coaching. But before we get into the actual work that she does, she told me a story at the end of the podcast that I'm now going to put up at the beginning because I want you to hear this story. It will inform how she arrived at her work. And it's a pretty traumatic and outrageous story, but I think it's a story of healing and of strength and of courage. So let's start with this story. This is Sasha Carrion.
So the reason why I got into hypnotherapy, I got into the self-help world, was because when I was 5 and my sister 3, our mother disappeared from the house that we were sleeping in. So imagine that our mother tucks us in to her bed because my parents were in the process of getting a divorce. My father was no longer living there. And we wake up the following morning and she's gone.
And where was this?
This was in Bell Gardens, California.
Okay.
Yeah. And it took a little while to get out because, I was little. I couldn't quite open the door. And we ended up going to the neighbor's house, asking for food. The neighbor noticed that something was off. She comes over and checks, notices that my mother's car door is open. There's no sight of my mother. And she calls the police. The police come by. My father shows up a few hours later. They ask him some questions. 2 days later, my father disappears. And so we become wards of the court. My grandmother, according to her, from what I remember her saying, she becomes the oldest woman in the state of California to adopt children. Mm-hmm. And it was very hard growing up with my grandmother because she looked at us as though we were my mother's big mistake. And she really hated the fact that she got stuck with us. But I know another part of her loved us. And she really did do the best she could, given the really flawed person that she was. She really did do her best. And my grandmother was a big believer of the American dream. And so my grandmother said, if you're born here, everything is possible. Especially as a woman, you're so lucky you're born here. And so she was very smart. My mother had put us in a little private school. And once we didn't have any parents, my grandmother couldn't possibly pay that. So she went over to the president of this little church school and she made a deal with him that if we got really good grades, we would get some scholarship money. So that is exactly what she brokered, so to speak. And every single evening, my grandmother sat with us to do homework. My sister and I both graduated from the same school early, and then we got scholarship money to UCLA. We got some scholarship money, took out some loans, and it was while there that I realized how different I was from the other kids. The other kids had everything. I had nothing, and I had nobody. I didn't have parents. I didn't have that the nurturing that parents gave kids. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a car. Everything for me was always just a struggle. And I decided that I needed to know what had happened. So to make a long story short, I had a family member take me down to Mexico because my dad was Mexican. My mother was Puerto Rican. And after being told my whole life that nobody knew where my father was, there was my father at the airport like nothing. So I asked my father what had happened. And he said, what happened is that your mother's side of the family is racist. They never liked me. I didn't have a good education like your mother. I didn't have papers. I was an alcoholic. I was a mess. And so I've just been lost in alcoholism because I never thought I'd get custody of you guys. So he pretty much told me that he was as much of a victim as we were. And I had so much empathy for him. And so for the next 10 years, I became a part of his family. And I was very loving, very giving to my father. We would go on these big trips. It turns out that we had a lot of things in common. We both loved archaeology and history and anthropology. So we would have a great time. But towards the end of those 10 years, his story started to slip. And I started to doubt him. I mentioned that to the same family member who had taken me down to Mexico to meet him. And a few weeks later, he called me up and he said, listen, I keep having epileptic seizures and I'm afraid that if I die, I'm going to have to face your mother on the other side. So that's when I found out the truth. And I found out that my mother was dead. And so he had me go over to his house, and sitting on his lawn chair, he told me how that night my father had broken into the house and he had attempted to suffocate my mother to death. And she had fought. She had really, really fought. And I found out her last words, which were my daughter's. She had pleaded for her life. And my father then broke her neck. He cleaned up the blood, put her in his car, drove down to the border. He knew a lot of women are killed in the border. And he knew that this way it would be hard to ID her body. My father was a butcher by trade, by the way. And he disposed of her body. And then he came back up. From that moment on, my life revolved around getting justice. But the thing was that back then I couldn't have him extradited. And so it felt so unfair, so unjust that this person, this monster, had gotten away with so much. And for me, it felt like not only did he screw me over as a kid, but now as an adult, I was livid. But the problem was that I had so much hate and I had so many emotions trapped in me that I was, so to speak, drinking the poison. And that was when I started getting the migraines, the neck, shoulder pain, and all that stuff that I was telling you about earlier.
Wow.
And I got into hypnotherapy because honestly, it was the only thing that worked for me. I mean, I tried seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I took Lexapro. I went to 2 different doctors. More prescriptions. But hypnotherapy was the one thing that worked for me. And I'm always honest with people. And I always tell people, I didn't believe in this because I didn't. In fact, the first time I went to go see a hypnotherapist, I walked out of there thinking, yeah, this was bunk. I just had a few $100s go down the drain. But soon after, I got a call from another woman. And I told her, I already did it. It's too late. I already did it. And it doesn't work. And she said, it does work. And I said, no, it doesn't. And she said, it does. And I will guarantee it. I said, are you sure? She said, I will guarantee it. And every single time I went in, I got better and better. And here we are now.
Whoa, that is the most intense story I think I've ever heard.
Right? You can't make this kind of stuff up. Yeah. Honestly, it's like something. It's even wilder than a telenovela. And you know what's even crazier too is that if you met me on the street, Bob, would you ever think that I've gone through all that?
No, because you don't come off like somebody who's had that kind of a tragedy, but also pain is invisible, so there's nowhere to really know what people are walking around with. You can't tell.
Yeah.
Unless they tell you. And that's really intense. I'm assuming your father has passed away since then.
Oh yeah, he has. Yeah. He has since then. And What's been great is that through my career, what I've been able to do is channel all that negativity into something positive.
Yeah.
Honestly, before I started doing this line of work, I always felt as though I was floating. I just never had a purpose. Some people know what they're meant to do. I never did. But once I found this, it all made sense to me. And I knew that I had found my calling.
Yeah. I mean, I actually, as much as that's a horrible story in terms of your dad, I mean, the pain he must have lived with 24/7 for so long, probably prior to doing what he did and certainly after. I mean, his whole life was just not truthful.
No, and it turned out too, when I started investigating and looking into what he had done in the past, I actually found out that he had killed other people. My mother wasn't the only person. There was rumors in the family that he had been a hitman in Mexico.
Oh, okay. So he grew up in some pretty treacherous territory.
Yeah, and he had a lot of issues with his own mother himself. But he had issues with women, and he was just a really messed up person. In fact, the wild thing was that my father had mementos of my mother at his house in Mexico. Like, he had pictures of her. He had things that had belonged to her that he still had. And I look back and I think, how could my stepmother have been okay with that he was keeping in this box things that belonged to her, like a belt and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably a good chance he was loaded when he did it too.
Oh, I'm sure. Drunk as usual. And
yeah, it's really sad. Well, you are a miracle. That you've, worked hard to become is what I can see. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. That's the strength of that was really, I'm kind of knocked back into my chair here.
Yeah. And I think that for me, I think my story conveys the idea that it doesn't make a difference how crappy your past has been, that at any moment you can create the life that you want to live. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your life is going to be perfect, but it does mean that it's going to be a life that is really by your design.
We're going to get into her work here in a second. I first want to invite you to check out my website, theexplodinghuman.com. And you can see photos of my guests and read synopses and listen to the episodes and find out a little bit about me, a little bio on there. And there's a donate button if you'd like to support the show. And also, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. So now let's get into Sasha's work. And here she is, Sasha Carrion.
Hypnotherapy is the use of hypnosis in a therapeutic setting. So that's the difference between hypnosis and hypnotherapy. Hypnosis is the larger branch, the big umbrella, and hypnotherapy is defining the use of hypnosis as a therapeutic tool. And, I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And it's amazing. I've helped so many people with so many different things. And there are honestly times, Bob, where the results surprise even me.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, I swear there have been times where people have come in and, there are times when people have asked me, like, have you worked with a situation like this? And I'm always straight up honest. If I have, I have. If I haven't, I haven't. And there have been times where in my head, I'm thinking, okay, God, I need your help on this one. God, guide me, please. Let me be a conduit. And I do the session, and it turns out that session is the beginning of this whole new chapter of this person's life. And so hypnosis in itself is very different from what you hear of on TV and the different ideas that we get from Vegas. There is no quacking. There is no barking. There's none of that silly stuff. There is no mind control. In fact, when you're in a hypnotic state, you are really much in tune with yourself. And it's been my experience that if somebody tries to get you to do something that goes against your grain, you will not do it. In fact, I've gone to Vegas in sweats, a white shirt with a bun in my hair, no makeup, no nothing. And I always put my hand up to be one of the people up in the front. on a stage, and I am always one of the first people to get kicked off because I will not do anything ridiculous. And especially in Vegas, they want you to do sexual stuff. I won't do that either. And so in a therapeutic setting, the big difference is that the goal is to train the mind to do whatever it is that the person wants it to do.
I like that. So it's really a heightened technique for self-healing, self-revelation.
That's right. So the more I stay true to you, the better results we're going to get, because nobody knows you the way you know yourself. And that's what I love about it. It's different than traditional talk therapy in the sense that we hone in on exactly what you want. And whatever you tell me, your wish is my command, so to speak. I always say that I'm kind of like the genie. Mm-hmm. If you tell me, like, listen, in this certain setting where my significant other makes the mistake of egging me or doing whatever, I need to stay in my own power. I need to stay calm. I need to not lose it and not get aggressive. Well, that's exactly what we're going to work on. If you tell me I want to completely quit smoking cigarettes, that is what we're going to work on. And all of the suggestions that I'm going to give you are based on exactly that. And suggestions, by the way, are the commands that we give the mind when you're in that deeply relaxed setting. So there is no mind control. There's nothing funny. And the majority of the session, you can actually hear me.
Well, full disclosure, I have done hypnosis, hypnotherapy many years ago. I did a number of sessions with someone, and what you're saying is exactly what my experience was. Very, very deep relaxation, and almost a clarity.
Yes.
And a calmness in the body, but a clarity of the mind, and feeling like I'm actually experiencing myself in a way that I wish I did more often without this session happening. But it really was very helpful to me to see where I was, maybe making some decisions based on false beliefs. And who am I really under this? What kind of a being am I? And that was the great feeling about it. I didn't go for any other reason than to do it. It was complete curiosity. I didn't want to quit smoking. I didn't have any of that stuff. Although one time I went in and I had a back spasm, and my back was killing me, and I was walking crooked. And I had a history of that 2 or 3 times a year. And by the time I got up from that session, I had absolutely zero pain and was completely fine. I didn't even go in for that reason. It just sort of, and we barely even talked about it during the session, but because you don't really feel any pain under hypnosis because you're in some other altered state.
That's right. You're so deeply relaxed that what happens is that, it's like all of it just goes away. In fact, a lot of times, one of the reasons why it goes away is because we're starting to work on the issues that really cause that pain. Because there is a huge mental component to pain. I mean, at one point, I used to have such severe migraines, neck and shoulder pain. I mean, it was just hard to function. I could barely sleep. I could barely even move my neck. Mm-hmm. And I have not had those issues in years, because I got to the source of those problems.
That's amazing. And people sometimes don't realize how much the stress and the way we tell ourselves can cause us to have physical manifestations of those thoughts. It's such a powerful thing, the mind. And
And that's right. And it can also cause us to sabotage ourselves. So I'll give you a really good example.
Good. I love examples.
Yeah.
Case studies and examples are my thing.
Yeah. Oh, I've got plenty of those for you.
Okay. Yes.
So not too long ago, I had an artist come in, a guy who is both a writer as well as singer. This guy has had hits in the charts. He's very good at what he does. He's a very talented person. And in the majority of sessions, I give the mind direct suggestions. But in this session, he actually wanted to have a talking session, which is where I put the person in the hypnotic state and I start asking him things. And usually what happens is that you're very in tune with yourself. Like you said before, you have that clarity and this amazing awareness. And so there are things that come to you that normally would never come to you. And so one of the things he had told me is that he hadn't really been experiencing that flow while writing. And, when any creative person wants to experience that, where it's like, it's almost as though the universe is just like handing you the words, the lyrics, all that kind of stuff, the ideas. And he wasn't experiencing that. So I asked him, would you like to start making more music? And he said, no. And I was taken aback because this is this guy's only job. And he's already been really successful at it. And so I asked him, why not? And he said, because I've already known success and I don't like my industry. And I don't want to experience more of what I experienced before. And so what I then had to do was give him suggestions that he wasn't going to experience the same stuff that he experienced before. Plus, he was wiser. This wasn't his first rodeo. And so I gave him suggestions for him to experience this great flow and creativity. And since then, he's been doing great. He's been writing away.
So he had a belief that the things were going to continue the same way because they had happened that way previously.
That's right.
And it was a block that he had based on
a limiting belief.
A limited belief, but a factual history, but not necessarily from here forward.
That's right. So he thought when he first got into the industry that it was going to be a certain way. And then he saw the, so to speak, ugly side. And he was taken aback by that. And so that what was really keeping him back, instead of him just making music because that's what he's meant to do. And once I was able to get him to put to the side those other limiting beliefs and have him feel like he was in control of the situation, which he is. He really is. I mean, he has an amazing name and he's great. Once I was able to do that, help him in that way, he was able to really allow himself to get back to the music without all the BS that had been attached to it.
That's amazing, because there's a lot of artist types in all the different arts that get really wounded and beat up by the ugly side, as you're saying. And the irony is that their sensitivity that makes them great gets beat up by the ugly side. And then and I can totally see where this guy was coming from, because I've experienced it, and I know other people have experienced, and it's the resilience is sometimes you say to yourself, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But in this situation, it sounds like he even went past that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is especially where there's any form of performance involved, there's always going to be a certain amount of risk. Let's be honest. There's always going to be more than a few people who are going to tell you no. And you still have to rise above that and do what's in your heart and soul, because there will always be an audience for what you are creating. And so sometimes you just have to do things just for yourself and not give a care about anything else. Just do it for you.
I wish somebody had said to me early on, you're going to hear no a lot more than yes. Don't take it personally. And made that go in a way where I didn't. I had to figure that one out myself, and it wasn't easy. It still isn't easy, to be honest. It's probably the hardest thing, because you feel like it's a personal rejection because it's your creative stuff. It's not like you're selling a vacuum cleaner to somebody and they don't want to buy it. It's like, oh, well, I don't feel bad because it's just a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. As part of what I do, I not only do hypnotherapy, but I also coach. And one of the things that I make sure to point out to people is that not everybody has the same ability to envision things the way you do. Not everybody has the same gift that you have. So if some people don't get it, that's okay.
Right.
That's okay.
My answer to that, when somebody says to me, I don't get it, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, you don't. So how, do you incorporate the hypnosis with your life coaching? I'm
That's
assuming
right.
That would be a huge.
I'm a 2-in-1.
How did you get started on the hypnosis? Did you study somewhere? How does that manifest? I know there's a couple of schools of hypnosis. There's one in the Valley here in Los Angeles, and
That's right. And that's honestly the best one.
is that the one?
Many.
Is that the one you? Oh, okay.
That's one of the ones that I went to. I'm actually double certified, and that particular school, HMI, is hands down like the best one.
Has hypnosis deepened your intuition so you can work with the people that you're working with?
Oh yeah, completely. Nowadays, honestly, Bob, there are times where I pick up so many things on people. It's just uncanny. And in fact, I've noticed that honestly, the best sessions that I experience are ones where I myself experience that flow. There's something to be said about when you connect with another human being, where there are times where the person and I haven't really even talked about a particular topic, but I somehow know I also need to give that person certain suggestions. It's almost as though somebody's whispering, in my ear, like, tell him this, get him to do this. You know what I mean? It's all positive anyway. And so definitely, I do feel that I have become more intuitive myself. I have just stronger gut instincts. And also I myself, I notice that I dream more often as well. And I can read my dreams in a way that I never had before. Before I would just disregard them and wouldn't think much of them. But now when I dream certain dreams, I think, okay, what am I being told?
About 20 minutes before this, I was talking to a friend of mine who he says, what's going on with your dreams? Mine are super vivid right now and really intense. And I'm talking to a lot of people that are saying the same thing.
Oh yeah.
And we're sort of attributing it to what's going on with the pandemic and that sort of heightened fear level or the not knowing level, and we're working things out in our sleep. I'm assuming that might be what it is, but I love the idea of interpreting dreams. I've done some of that, and I don't know if it's accurate, but it's really. I'll tell you one I had last night. I dreamt about this friend of mine, and I was staying with him at this hotel, and he didn't tell me this, but his new girlfriend, who doesn't exist, only in the dream, was coming over, and she was incredibly beautiful and wanted to get rid of me so they could be together. But I was sort of upset because he didn't tell me that she was coming, and I never would have, gone there if I knew that. And I was sort of upset with him that he didn't tell me. And then he said, "You got to go, man. And, we want to be alone and you have to leave." And then I run into him later at this event and he goes, "My girlfriend doesn't like you. She thinks you're a bad person." And I go, "Well, that's not true. I'm not that. I'm not. And you know that." And then he starts crying and telling me he switches his gears completely and starts crying and telling me she's this evil person who's really horrible. And I'm trying to reassure him about that, that he's fine. And, if she's that, he can just get out of it. And it's just not that big of a deal. And it was the most flip-floppy, interesting sort of experience. And it was a fictitious woman that I've never met. And,
So she, by the way, was just a symbol. She's just an abstract in there. And so what your mind is doing, a lot of times there are factual parts and then there are abstract parts of our dreams. And so it's about, reading into those and getting a feel for what that could mean, because a lot of times it's your mind that's communicating with you. But, there are certain dreams where it's like you're being foretold of something. I'll give you an example. I had one about 2 months ago. And it was the weirdest dream, because in my dream, a person that I had been very close to was attempting to do something to be malicious, to hurt me, to hurt my feelings. And so I never knew that person to have those kind of characteristics. So because of that, I totally disregarded it. And months went by, and about 2 weeks ago, I actually found out that that friend had unfortunately done something very unkind. And I was really taken aback by it. And so it was almost as though I was being forewarned or told of what had either already happened or was about to happen. And so since then, I've really started paying attention to my dreams.
They were unkind to you or to someone else?
They did something that would end up, that they knew would ultimately be hurtful to me.
Well,
yeah,
they won't be coming into your dreams again. We're going to make sure of that. So that's, I mean, I love this dream stuff too, because that the state of hypnosis is not like a dream state, but it's similar. Like those two worlds seem to
totally
are very fluid.
In fact, a lot of times people will be in a hypnotic state and they'll experience certain dreams. Like, they'll see themselves, have certain images and whatnot. And one of the ways that this works is that when you are in a hypnotic state, I have you imagine and visualize things, experience things however you want them to be. Because you see, this part of the mind cannot tell the difference between imagination versus reality. So we want you imagining things exactly the way you want them to be, with the idea that that is the way you are going to communicate to your subconscious mind the behavior, the patterns that you want. And then there's also this idea that there is the superconscious, that there's something even larger. And that when you're in this state, you're connecting to that and you're telling the universe, this is what I want.
That's pretty powerful stuff. So basically we manifest, our reality based on what we think.
Yeah. So I'll give you a really good example. I think it was HMI. I think it was the school itself. It might've been somebody else who knows, but I think it was HMI, who did a study where they had 3 different groups of basketball players. The first group didn't do any hypnosis and didn't do any practicing. The second group did hypnosis but didn't do any practicing. The third group did practicing but no hypnosis. And so, no surprise, the ones who did the practicing scored the best. But what was very interesting was that the people that did hypnosis scored pretty darn close to the ones that had been practicing.
The thing about practicing too, though, that is sort of like a hypnotic state. When you're in the groove of what you do, you're certainly operating on a different way. You're in it, is how I always put it. You're in it.
Totally. And I've worked with numerous athletes, professional athletes, because from time to time, people lose their groove for a little bit and they need to regain it. I once had a father bring me his son, and his son was just doing so poorly that it was shocking to everybody around him, because everybody knew him as somebody that was so talented. And he himself knew that he was talented. He just didn't understand what in the world was happening. And because of that, he was doing horribly. His father told me that he was praying to God, he was meditating, and all of a sudden, the idea of hypnotherapy popped into his head. He looked on Google, ran a search, he found me, brings his son in. I start working with him. He ended up signing a $3-something million contract. So
what was the thing that was blocking him, if you can say what that is?
Limiting beliefs and fear. Honestly, with most athletes, it's the fear that something is not going to happen correctly. So the more you focus on what you want, on what you don't want, the more it happens. The more your mind wants to go there.
Yeah, so he had a fear of something failing, basically, fear of failure.
Pretty much.
Not getting what he wanted, and so it was happening.
Yeah, and so I've had athletes tell me, in my head, I'm thinking, I'm not going to hit the ball well. And next thing you know, I don't hit it well. And so you literally create it. Same thing as even with anxiety and panic attacks. If you start whipping yourself up in a frenzy, even if you weren't going to have a panic attack, anxiety attack, you might just have it. The mind is powerful. It can either heal you or it can hurt you.
I had this very strong memory when I was a kid, and it wasn't a huge incident, but it was profound to me. I was on I was talking to this kid who was lived on my street. He was a couple years older. I was a little bit afraid of him.
Mm-hmm.
He had a little bit of a mean side to him, but we were, friends in the group of people. And I was talking to him, and I was sitting on my bike, and I remember thinking, he's going to push me off my bike. Now, I don't know where, just because I was afraid of him. And I kept thinking it, and all of a sudden, I fell off the bike. I was standing there, feet on either side of the seat. And I fell, and he goes, "What happened? What's going on?" And I go, "You were going to push me." He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I know you were. I know you were thinking it." And he goes, "You're crazy," and was I crazy? No, I just talked myself into this thing. And I remember thinking like, wow, he wasn't going to do that. And I just did it for him.
That's a great example, actually. That's a great example.
Yeah. And he was laughing because it was so ridiculous to him. It wasn't even close to being on his mind, but it was on mine.
Yeah. And, a lot of our ideas, they're fabricated in our head. And a lot of our ideas of what things are going to happen in the future, they also come from past experiences as well. There's a big part of our mind that actually resides in the past, which is problematic if you've experienced a lot of trauma and you haven't worked through it, because a lot of times people live in fear and they sabotage themselves because they're constantly thinking that whatever happened in the past is going to happen again. And that's why, for example, there are a lot of people that experience a lot of social anxiety. If you're somebody who was picked on as a kid, it could be that now as an adult, you're just thinking, oh my God, are they going to like me? They're not going to like me. They're not going to like me. And you're so stressed out that you can't even feel normal around people anymore.
Yeah, that trauma stuff is huge. It's when I read, you probably have read this book, but it's called "The Body Keeps the Score." Have you ever read that book?
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Very powerful, very strong examples of trauma, but really how just, trauma happens and then it lives in the body, and it can get triggered as if it is happening again by something much smaller and insignificant. Even it's, whether it's just a simple rejection or, and the visceral deep feeling comes out again. And I can see why, those types of things would rule your life.
And I'm so happy you just said that, Bob. You've made a very important point, and that is that leads to me replying that, there's a part of our mind that is always referring to the past. And many times that's actually a big part of our problems, that our minds keep wanting to go back there. And so with hypnotherapy, the goal is to make it so that in the future, when your mind wants to refer to the past, that it starts going to the new set points that we put in there. Because in the future, today will technically be in the past. Does that make sense?
Completely. There's that great saying, and I don't know who said it, but I've always, loved it. We are all puppets whose strings are being pulled by the past. I forgot who said that. It's I'm sure it's somebody very obvious that I've forgotten. So this brings me to the past again in a different way. Let's talk about, if you can, and maybe you do this and maybe you don't, I don't know. I have done a couple of these past life regressions. Really fascinating stuff to me. I've done it with two different people and had some really interesting results. So the first one was a little bit more vague, and the second one was very clear. I even got a name and a time period and where I was living. I was a woman in it was like Austria kind of area. I forgot the name. I had a name, and I was a domestic who had a husband that was crippled, and I had to take care of him. And he actually outlived me in this life. This was a really, and it wasn't sad or happy or anything. It just was. And I looked up the name, and the name exists. Not that it was me back then, but it was not an uncommon name necessarily. And I remember coming out of that going, maybe that's why sometimes I feel burdened having to take care of other people. I guess maybe everyone feels that way, but it was a kind of a profound it was more of a feeling than an actual concrete kind of thing. It was coming out of it like, oh, this is not an unfamiliar feeling to me now, the way I felt as that person. And it gave me some empathy that I hadn't had about what it must like to be female, because I've never, I don't know what that's like, but I guess I did then. How do I sound nutty?
Not at all. I'll give you a really good example. I had a woman once come in, and she told me that there was a coworker with whom she shared these feelings, and they were pretty intense. Now, this was a married woman, and so she told me that it made her a little confused, and sometimes when things weren't going well with her husband, she would wonder, like, maybe I'm meant to be with this other guy. And so I hypnotized her, and she went back to way back to another life. And she saw that sure enough, she had actually been married to the other guy in that lifetime. And she also saw that in that lifetime, he had actually abandoned her. He had really let her down. And so when she came to, she had this clarity. She told me, I'm not leaving my husband for that guy. I'm not doing it. I'm gonna stick with my husband.
Good move.
Yeah, and she just focused on really making that relationship work.
Did she tell the other guy what had happened? I don't think she did. I'm going to say she didn't.
No, I'm sure she didn't tell him. No,
guess what, Larry? I was married to you.
Yeah, she walked out of here with this clarity, with this, like, she had this look of peace on her face, where she felt like, you know what, I'm no longer feeling like I'm being pulled, tugged on both sides. So it was good.
That must have been great. Well, give me another story of something that you hadn't done before, and the person said, have you ever done this? And this topic, and you said no, and something new happened. I love case histories. That's just my
So I had a woman email me, and she told me the story of how she got sick. She lost her voice. We've all lost our voice at some point or another, usually maybe a few times in our lives. Mm-hmm. She said that her voice never came back. And so she went to see two different speech therapists to help her to bring it back. And they showed that her larynx had moved a smidge, but even so, they said, you should be able to really speak. This isn't that much of an issue. And so they told her maybe it's something emotional. So she sent me a message, and she said, listen, I'm a contract teacher. And, unlike regular teachers, if I'm not able to do my job, they can easily just let go of me. And the thing is, my father has never been in my life. I haven't spoken to my mother in 10 years. So I'm on my own. I have to be able to take care of myself. And right now, I'm just so scared for my future. And the thing is this, I need your help, but I don't even have all the money to come see you. So I'm asking for you to please take what I can pay and just please help me. And I probably won't be able to afford to come back in for another session. So for me, that put a lot of pressure on me, because for most things, honestly, it takes a certain amount of sessions. And so she came in, sure enough, her voice was pretty bad. She could talk, but it was like barely, and her voice sounded really off. It didn't sound anything normal. And I remember that as I was beginning that session, I prayed to God and I said, God, guide me on this one, please. This one is all you. And so I did the session, and a week later, she couldn't tell the difference, but her kids, the kids that she worked with, they could tell the difference. 3 weeks out, 90% of her voice had come back. For somebody like that, my approach is to put everything in the kitchen sink in there. Mm-hmm. I assure you that I gave her suggestions for even issues with her father, her mother. Remember, she's already told me that she's had a tough, childhood relationship. So it could have been with these people. So it could have been a variety of different things. Mm-hmm. And it could have been that she went through something and that was just the last straw. and she just couldn't take anymore. And maybe on a level, her mind just decided, you know what? Let's check out for a little bit. Who knows?
Do you ever get people that you don't see much, and then 6-8 months down the road, all of a sudden, let's say they've lost weight and they couldn't do it while they were coming, but there was a delayed kind of a reaction, since, I mean, you're actually helping people to change their thought process, and maybe that takes a little longer than just the immediacy of the sessions.
Yeah, so it's funny that you talk about weight, because out of everything I do, anything having to do with eating and losing weight is a process. It's very different from smoking cessation. A person can put down that cigarette and never smoke again. But when it comes to anything having to do with eating, losing weight, completely different. It takes reinforcement. Reason being is that at least a few times in a day, you have a few opportunities to either get things wrong or right. It's not like putting down that cigarette and never picking it up. And so it takes reinforcement. And one of the things that I've found is that anything having to do with eating is usually really complex, and it has a whole lot to do with our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that takes reinforcement out of everything that I do. Some things are faster. I can help a person to quit smoking in 1 to 2 sessions. Some things such as like hard drugs, it takes more reinforcement to make sure that the person doesn't fall off the wagon. And then from time to time, I don't know how it happens, but from time to time, people nail things in one session. And I myself never understand that. But maybe in that moment, that person was so ready that the mind just absorbed it and just went with it.
Yeah. Or they needed the permission to hit that next level of understanding.
Yeah.
That must be so rewarding to see something like that, man.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's for me, it's been very satisfying to do this kind of work. And also for me, it's taught me certain things. It's taught me certain things such as nothing and nobody's perfect. And nobody has a perfect life.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, nobody has a perfect life. Yeah. And then other things that I've noticed is that, for example, a lot of people have the limiting beliefs that they're never going to find love. Do you know how many times people have told me they're never going to find a life partner? And then, next thing you know, they're getting married and going to a wedding, just all kinds of stuff.
I think that's the biggest one for people, is that I think most people want that, and they feel like if it's not happening fast enough or in the right way, they've had a couple of relationships that have gone south. They just think, oh, I'm doomed. It's never going to happen. And you tell yourself that it's like, if you think it, that's what's going to be. I would imagine you can't be open to something if you're closed to it at the same time.
Oh yeah.
That would be tough. So tell me about some of the other things you do. Because I saw you had some products on your website, and you had there was some announcement about something new you were going to be doing. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. So I have a line of self-help products, and all the products come with a guided meditation, which is really hypnotherapy. I just call it guided meditation because for a lot of people, the words hypnosis and hypnotherapy are scary, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it comes with a guided meditation that anchors the person with a particular mindset. So for example, I have bracelets that say she believed she could, so she did. And if a woman gets one of those, what she can do is listen to the mind training audio that comes with it. And what I do is I give that person the suggestion that each and every single time they see or feel that bracelet, that it's going to give their mind a nonverbal suggestion that is going to reinforce all of the suggestions that I put in that audio. And that is what is called an anchoring technique. And I got the idea from the anchoring techniques that I actually use here in my office to help people to quit smoking. And I've helped so many people to quit smoking. It works really well. So I have my bracelets. I have bottles that say I'm thirsty on them. And those come with the guided meditation that makes you want to drink plenty of water. Mm-hmm. And, about 70-something% of people are not drinking enough water. So that's something everybody can use. And now I have my latest set of products, which are all weighted blankets.
That's what I was looking at. I love weighted blankets. I have one. It's not one of yours, but it's somebody's.
Yeah.
They're great.
Love mine. Yeah. So mine actually have a cutout here at the neck.
Mm-hmm.
So this way you can get more of the weight on your shoulders as opposed to just having it bunch up at the neck. And, they come with 3 guided meditations. And what's great about the guided meditations is that they're all meditations that at some point you are going to need. Number 1, there's the self-confidence booster. Who couldn't use some of that?
Mm-hmm.
The next one is the anti-anxiety one, which is the anxiety be gone. Right now, everybody can use that one. And then lastly, the deep sleep one. So it's great because it's the same price point as other major brands, but you also get my 3 guided meditations. And the cool thing is that everything I do in English, I also do in Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah, everything I do in English and Spanish.
And what was the other thing that you're doing? There was something you said it's coming soon. Maybe
that is, I'm working on launching programs, online programs.
Okay.
Because I've come to realize, Bob, there's only one of me. And, I'm a single mom to a little 4-year-old boy. And juggling everything can be brutal sometimes. And, this is the one little boy that I have, and I want to spend as much time with him as possible. And by launching these programs, I'll be able to reach more people, help more people with the same techniques that I use here in my office. That's
great. And you get to spend time with your son.
That's right.
Which is great. That's such the cutest age. Oh,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know. It's just the questions, the constant questions. Why?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you explain something to him and he keeps going, why? It's like, it doesn't stop. Right. And for me, I speak in Spanish to my son because my goal is to make it so that he's trilingual. Mm-hmm. His father speaks Mandarin to him when he goes to his place. And he's learning the English like this anyway. It's amazing. But so he'll start with, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Eventually you just go, just cuz. That's why.
Yeah.
So let's plug your website for people if they want to get a hold of you and, find out more or buy one of your wonderful products or tapes or, sign into the online training work that you're going to be doing. This is all good stuff.
Yeah. So feel free to go to sashacarrion.com, SASHACARRION.com. And my line of self-help products is mentalmantras.com. But people can actually book their appointments on there.
Oh, okay. So you are still doing sessions and live sessions.
That's right.
And great. So do you do sessions online also? I would imagine.
I do. I most definitely do. So you can come in person as well as do them online.
See, so you're flexible.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's interesting is that one of the caveats for a successful mind is having a strong yet flexible mind.
That's a perfect way to end.
Yeah.
Strong yet flexible mind. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I've had a great time with you.
Much love and luck to you and success and you and your son. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
Well, thank you for this great opportunity, Bob.
I also want to take a second here to thank Sam Tripoli, who had me on his show called Tinfoil Hat, and all the people from the Swarm who have now subscribed to The Exploding Human. Appreciate you guys. Probably should have said that up front, but I forgot until now. But I do appreciate it, and appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much, and we'll be back. Bye.